Ford signs a spate of deals with miners, and Elon Musk gives career advice. You're listening to Kitco Roundtable. I'm your host, Michael McCrae. Kitco correspondent Paul Harris is in. How you doing, Paul?
Hey, very well, Michael. Thank you very much.
And with us is the CEO of Cornish Metals, Richard Williams. Cornish covers all things battery metals with lithium, tin, and nickel projects. The flagship project is the company's South Crofty tin project. The mining legend Mick Davis invested over £25 million in Cornish Metals to advance South Crofty. Richard, welcome to Kitco.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to be here.
Richard, maybe you can sum up what you're focused on.
Well, I joined Cornish Metals. At the time, it was called Strongbow Exploration in 2015. And the mandate at the time was to look for high quality tin projects, and probably like 99% of the investment community at the time didn't think that tin had much use in the world. After a bit of research and realizing that tin is really fundamental to anything electronic, we started looking for good projects. And the standout project in a good jurisdiction that had a mining history was South Crofty. So we acquired that. We completed the acquisition in 2016. And the thing that really attracted us about South Crofty is, number one, Cornwall is really a world-class tin region. It's got a very long history of tin mining, obviously dating back to the Bronze Age. South Crofty, I think, is regarded as the jewel in the crown of the Cornish tin mining industry. It was a mine that operated for pretty much 400 years, from 1592 until 1998 when it closed. It's a very high-grade underground tin opportunity. And we benefit from the fact that it's got a mining permit in place that's valid for another 50 years, plus full planning permission to build a new process plant. So from our perspective, it ticked all of the boxes. And when you look at kind of the macro scale and where the supply is coming from, there's really no primary tin mine production in Europe, and certainly none in North America. So we saw an opportunity there to get ahead of the curve for what we're seeing today on the strategic metal side.
Paul?
So most tin supply, correct me if I'm wrong, that seems to come from sort of Bolivia, is it Myanmar and Indonesia?
75% of all the mine tin production today comes from Myanmar, China, and Indonesia. Bolivia, there is production there, but it's really artisanal scale. There's a lot of geopolitical and local community issues in Bolivia that has really hindered growth in the sector there.
Thank you.
Richard, you joined us on a good week because there was so much energy transition and battery metal news. We'll get into a discussion about developing the project later in the podcast. First, let's turn to macro. Gold is finishing the week strong after dropping below 1,700 midweek when it hit an 11-month low. Gold is approaching the mid-1700s as of this podcast. Gold was a bright spot. Most of the other commodities are trending down. Oil is in the mid-90s, silver is still around the $1,800 range, and copper was mostly sideways this week at $3.30 a pound. In most of the quarterlies, companies said commodity prices are getting soft. Elon Musk made the observations in his Q2. The company's margins were hit by high commodity prices, but Musk noted that prices are generally trending lower for commodities. Paul, what did you see in mining?
Well, let's start off with things related to battery metals. As you mentioned at the top, a busy week for Ford, which signed agreements with BHP, Sierra, Compass, Valley, and Ioneer, amongst a couple of others there. Emerging US lithium boron supplier Ioneer announced it signed a binding offtake supply agreement with Ford for lithium carbonate from its $785 million Rhyolite Ridge project in Nevada, in the US. The 5-year agreement is for 7,000 tons per year of technical grade lithium from 2025. Ioneer expects to produce over 20,000 tons a year of lithium carbonate equivalent from that operation, in addition to about 175,000 tons a year of boric acid over 26 years. In Canada Nickel Company announced the results of laboratory tests for a new method of accelerated carbon capture called in-process tailings carbonation, which it believes has transformative potential. A laboratory scale test program showed that IPT could allow tailings from its Crawford project in Ontario to absorb enough CO2 to achieve net zero carbon emissions within 36 hours and generate up to 21 tonnes of CO2 credits per tonne of nickel produced within just 6 days. At Crawford, this translates into an average of about 710,000 tonnes of CO2 credits per year. Test work is ongoing. Moving into copper, South 32 is to invest 10.3 million Canadian dollars into junior copper explorer Aldebaran Resources, which has the Altar copper gold project in San Juan, Argentina. Aldebaran aims to drill up to 25,000 meters there this year as it seeks to build on the 15.2 billion pound resource it already had. Altar provides South 32 with access to an additional copper development possibility in the Americas, in addition to its Hermosa project in Arizona in the US, which it bought in 2018, and its Ambler Metals joint venture with Trilogy Metals in Alaska. Sticking in that part of the world, Chilean copper producer Antofagasta signed an earning agreement with Cornwall Minerals on the Tanacross copper gold project in Alaska. The agreement grants Antofagasta an option to acquire 70% interest in the project by spending $30 million US on exploration over 8 years and delivering a preliminary economic assessment. Tanacross is in the same cluster of late Cretaceous porphyry copper occurrences with mineralization similar to what Western Copper and Gold has at Casino Deposit, at its Casino Deposit in Yukon in Canada, about 140 kilometers away. Turning to gold, G Mining Ventures reached a financing agreement for a total of $481 million US to fund construction of the Tocantinzinho gold project in Pará State in Brazil. The total package consists of 116 million equity financing from La Mancha Investments, Franco-Nevada, and Eldorado Gold. Franco will also provide a $250 million gold stream on the primary commodity there and a $75 million senior secured term loan. Finally, also in Brazil, in Pará State, Belo Sun Mining said the state Supreme Court overturned a suspension order related to the construction and environmental licenses for its Volta Grande gold development project. The court overturned the suspension on the grounds that there was no evidence of damage or harm to the riverside people on both banks of the Xingu River, and that they were properly consulted as part of the environmental studies conducted by Belo Sun. Belo Sun received a construction license for the project in 2017, but has been hit with a series of court decisions impeding its progress. The 2015 feasibility study detailed a mine to produce 268,000 ounces a year over the first 10 years at the project.
Your $400 million number, Paul, just reminded me that that was also the financing that just came through the wire today. We had a interview with EnergyX, which is in the direct lithium extraction business, and also will come up as my number of the week. But they did announce that they did have that large financing. They're focused on actually helping out the large Albemarles and the SQMs with being able to do what they're talking about, maybe a transition into types of lithium processing that will require less water. Richard, I'd like to bring you back. Now, you did mention that you are developing in South Crofty, which is in the UK. Can you talk about being able to get big projects built in Europe? Because some have gone through, but also some have had some rocky receptions. Paul, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, Great Britain's no longer part of Europe, so let's get that straight.
Sir, I as I was wading into it, I could almost tell, I could feel that there were some red flags going off there. Thank you for correcting me, Paul.
Well, I think from the UK's perspective, if you look, I'll give some other examples first. You've got the Woodsmith project, which is up in Yorkshire. It's actually a polyhalite mine that's being developed by Anglo American. It's got a very, very long life. It's similar to potash in nature. They're developing that right now. It's a multi-billion-dollar project. It's in a national park. They're developing like a 35 or 40 kilometer long tunnel to convey all of the material out from the underground workings. So that's been permitted. Scott Gold in Scotland has got its mine into production. And from our perspective, as I touched on earlier, we've already got a mine permit that's been granted. It's in effect for almost another 50 years. We've got full planning permission from the local mineral planning authority to build the process plant. And, I think what really works in our favor and the beauty of the project is because it's had such a long mine life in the past, there's a fairly large amount of void space underground. So all of the tailings that we generate from mineral processing can be put back underground. So it's really got a very small footprint on surface. It's a high-grade underground operation, or it will be. So we've got very strong local community support. Camborne and Poole, I think could really do with the economic boost that this project would bring to the area. We did publish a PEA in 2017. It's been superseded now by a more recent resource update. But that PEA outlined creation of 275 direct, highly skilled jobs, and more likely probably 1,000 indirect jobs. So a real good boost for the local economy. And on top of that, the government has kind of identified Cornwall as what they call a high potential opportunity region for the mineral potential. So I think the government is starting to come around to this realization that you can't rely on sources of metals from elsewhere and turn a blind eye, and it all contributes to achieving the net zero objectives of the UK government.
Paul?
I just want to sort of couple of follow-up points there, Richard. The UK government in general seems to be very supportive of energy transition, green metals initiatives. I was reading just today that the government's really looking to help develop, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but sort of environmentally friendly fuel for the airline industry, for the aviation industry. The government is looking to develop 7 plants in the UK to develop more sort of aviation fuel with lower carbon. So I imagine there's a whole bunch of things that you can sort of potentially tap into there in terms of support, perhaps funding or other things to help you on your way.
Well, the timing is good because just this morning the UK government published its new critical mineral strategy. Tin is on the list. Clearly, I think, again, supply chain issues have been very dominant in the global mindset recently with what's happening in Ukraine, Russia, and obviously the threat from China towards Taiwan. It's almost like we see in the end of globalization in slow motion here. The government, it's coming around to the realization that if you can source materials locally and you can do it responsibly and ethically, then it's going to be benefit to the UK economy and local populations. On top of that, Cornwall is blessed with being probably one of the windiest regions in the country. So there's massive potential for offshore renewable power generation through floating wind farms. There's already abundant solar power generation down in Cornwall as well. So I think that's really going to help with the power supply that has been part of an issue to the UK over the last few months.
In terms of sort of carbon capture, a lot of the sort of projects or technologies being advanced are looking to capture carbon. And the issue has been, what you do with it, where do you store it? And one of the solutions has been to stick it in old mines. As you mentioned, you've got sort of 400 years of adits sitting underneath you. Is that a possibility at some point in the future for you?
I can't say we've looked at that particular aspect at this point. It's interesting what we touched on earlier about the Canada Nickel company and what they've been doing. It's certainly something that we look at. I think, part of the investment from Vision Blue and Sir Mick Davis's view on the world is clearly if whatever we can do to help achieve the UK government reach net zero, then we'll do whatever we can. And if it makes sense to do that, we'll certainly look at it.
Thank you.
What's the, Richard, what is it like processing the ore? How does it compare to other types of mining operations, either copper or gold?
Again, South Crofty, I think it's fairly unique from a mineral process. Well, unique, it's very straightforward. The tin occurs in the form of a mineral called cassiterite, which is a tin oxide. It's similar to a gold deposit or a high-grade vein system where the tin occurs in steeply dipping veins, but in this case it's just cassiterite rather than gold. Cassiterite's quite a heavy mineral, so historically they were recovering around 70% of the tin from straight gravity processes. And when Rio Tinto took over the project in the late 70s, they built a flotation circuit at the nearby Wheeljain project, and from that they managed to recover almost 90% of the tin from gravity and flotation. Again, because of the nature of the mineralization and the host rock, it's not an acid-generating system. It's very benign. It's granite with quartz veins in it and cassiterite. So it's very, very simple processing. And we've got all of the records and some of the key people that were involved in the operations up until 1998 working with the company. And so it's really, for us, it's just a fairly straightforward transition. Dewater the mine, it is flooded today, and use the expertise from fairly recent operations to put the mine back into production.
The word that you hear a lot in battery metals is localization. Can you talk about the customers? You're kind of uniquely located when we talked at the top when Paul was talking about the sources of tin.
Yeah, I think that the thing that stood out for me when I first started looking at tin was that there is zero tin production in North America. And the only tin production from mining operations in Europe is really byproduct tin from some of the tungsten mines in Spain and Portugal. The thing that I think really resonated with me is that end users of electronics are really quite keen to ensure that the products that they're buying are sourced responsibly and ethically. And when you look at some of the tin operations around the world, I'll use an example. Some certain parts of Africa, you've got artisanal mining that maybe the proceeds from that go towards funding conflict. Certainly in Myanmar, you might see the same thing. In other parts of the world, you see large alluvial dredging operations to recover tin, which have a big impact on marine life and the local environment, oceanic sea life. And so we tick all of the boxes in that regard. And I think from the end user's perspective, I think investors and buyers of consumer electronics really want to know that the products they're buying come from good places. And so we see an opportunity here to capture end users in North America and Europe and the UK for the tin we produce.
Now, tin hit a peak in February, I believe, about 46. We're nearly half of that now. Richard, what's the bull case for tin, and what price does the project work at?
We had a conference recently, actually the week before PDAC, the International Tin Association. And we will growth of tin demand is around 1.82% per year. And even if we take that basic projection forward, you're looking at having 1 to 2 South Crofties come on production every year to meet that growing demand. There was one presentation that talked about semiconductors, and it was really more focused on silica and silicon. But tin is used in not every semiconductor. It is the glue in electronics. So they were projecting massive growth in the need for semiconductors, and I think we've seen that in the supply chain shortages over the last 6 to 12 months, 18 months. And when you look at that, it's really all related to this transition into renewable power, electric vehicles, robotics, better computing capacity, rollout of 5G, the Internet of Things, and all of these things require tin. And the International Tin Association referred to it as a technology supercycle. And as we are coming into that, if you get growth rates of 3 to 4% per year on the demand side, the way we look at the tin market right now, it just doesn't have the capacity to deliver that kind of production, given the current operations. A lot of the operations have been in production for a long time. Some of them are coming towards the end of their mine lives. There's been very little investment into exploration and discovery of new tin mines over the last 30 years because the tin price was low. But now with this rollout and the use of tin as solder in electronics, that environment is changing pretty quickly. From a tin price perspective, we did our PEA in 2017 using a $10 a pound tin price, which equates to $22,000 a ton. Today it's around $13.60 a pound, and most analysts are projecting over the next 5 years and forwards at least $30,000 a ton.
Paul?
Unlike other sort of energy-related base metals like copper and aluminium, you don't really hear a lot about recycling of tin. And given that it's in electronics, I imagine it would be quite difficult to recycle that. I mean, is there any recycling of tin?
Yeah, about a quarter of the global production of tin today comes from recycling. But that is from probably larger, older appliances where the soldering was much larger and easier to recover. I think in consumer electronics like the iPhone and the iPad, there's been this drive towards miniaturization over the last 10 years, use less material. So the amount of tin per appliance is less, but the number of appliances has really exploded upwards. But the spin-off from that is from a recycling perspective. There's such a small amount of tin in each appliance. It's very often uneconomic, not worth the cost to actually recover the tin. And through this, drive to miniaturization, you're actually losing tin from the cycle.
Thank you.
Richard, how's your funding situation?
Well, very good. Since we closed the financing in May, we raised 65 million Canadian, just over 40 million pounds. As you touched on earlier, the lead investor there was Vision Blue Resources, which is a new commodities investment fund, resource investment fund started by Sir Mick Davis. We were the fourth investment that they've made. I think it's a real strong endorsement of how they see the quality of the project and the importance of tin to this energy transition. So the next 2.5 years will be focused on building a water treatment plant, dewatering the mine. We've already commenced the drill program to accelerate the feasibility study. So we'll be collecting samples for metallurgical test work, ore sorting studies, and paste backfill studies.
We mentioned his name twice, Richard. Maybe I could lean on you for Mick Davis. Who is he and why is he so prominent in the mining space?
Well, Mick Davis was the founder. He built Xstrata to the company it was. So, one of the biggest multi-commodity mining companies in the world. So he's got an extremely good track record. And I think anything that he invests in and his team invest in, they take seriously and carries a lot of weight in the market.
Let's turn to our number of the week. Richard, do you have a number for us?
I got two numbers, if that's okay. It was an article that came up today in the Financial Times, and I touched on it just now because it was a presentation that was made at the Tin Conference in Toronto. It's 85 and 75, and it's all to do with semiconductors. And 85% of all the semiconductors in the world are designed in the USA. But 75% of them are manufactured, and 97% of them are manufactured and packaged in Asia. And that's part of the concern that's coming about with the geopolitical tensions that we have today about supply chain issues. And as a result of that, the US government is now looking at a $52 billion investment into building its own domestic semiconductor manufacturing sector.
Paul, your number? I've got a couple as well, actually. 7 is the first one, and that's the number of battery-related deals Ford announced this week, including for nickel, lithium, and graphite. And my second number, more personal one, is 13. That's the number of meetings I've already got booked at the Precious Metals Summit in about a month's time. So if you want to meet with me there or at the Gulf for Americas, please get in touch.
And then you can make it 14, so you get from underneath the 13, Paul. My number is unlimited, and that comes from Elon Musk, which pretty much had the quote of the week when he was touching upon the mining space. Riffing on the high material price for his cars, especially around lithium, he said, entrepreneurs enter the lithium refining business. It's a license to print money. Richard Williams, any highlights or milestones you want to note at Cornish over the next 12 months?
Well, I think the main points are obviously we're starting construction of the water treatment plant. So we hope to get that built and commissioned in the first half of next year. From there, it's really a pumping exercise to dewater the mine. And in the meantime, we'll be doing all the drilling for the feasibility study. So there'll be news from drilling to come out, and exciting times for the company and for Cornwall.
That's it for us. Follow me at Michael McCrae. That's McCrae with 2 C's. Paul is at Paul Harris Gold. Richard Williams, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, through the website, www.cornishmetals.com. Contact numbers are on there. My email address, richard@cornishmetals.com.
If you like what you hear, tell a friend. Don't forget to subscribe. On behalf of Richard Williams, Paul Harris, and myself, have a pleasant weekend.